Hey, what's up? This is video lesson 5.5, and we are going to be comparing and ordering rational numbers. And what that means is you're going to be comparing fractions, decimals, percents, and they're going to be negatives and positives mixed in. So, as we do this, a couple rules I want you to remember. First off, when we're comparing negatives, you always think in reverse, right? Just like when we just compared negative numbers. And the other thing is, we're going to change everything to percents. So if you can remember those two things, then you should be good. So let's start with number 1. In number 1, we're comparing negative 1 2/10 compared with positive 8/10. Now, do you remember the rule from when we did negative integers? Negatives are always less than positives. Positives are always greater than negatives. So in this one, I don't really have to do a whole lot of thinking. I know the negative is going to be less than. But take a look at example 2. In example 2, you have two negatives. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change both of these two percents. So when I deep them twice to the right, I get negative 140% versus negative 125%. Now that they're both percents, I'm going to think in reverse. So normally, if they were positive, 140 would be bigger. But since it's negative, it's going to be less. Okay? Now we're going to go down and we're going to show you two fractions. So what I'm going to do is they're both negative, so keep that in mind, but I'm also going to change them both to percents. And you can do it other ways if you want to change them both to decimals. If you want to cross multiply, that's fine. But I'm going to try to keep it simple here. So first off, 3/8. I'm going to do 3 divided by 8, and I get 0.375. And then I'm going to deep it, move my decimal twice to the right, and I get negative 37.5%. And you know what? I probably don't even need that 0.5, so I'm just going to ignore that for now. We'll just say, let's just round it to 38%. If you want to keep it 37.5, that's fine. Now 5/16. So I'm going to do 5 divided by 16, and I get 0.3125. So when I deep it, move it twice to the right, it's going to be 31%. Now remember, they're both negative, so it's negative 31%. Now that I have my percents, I just have to compare them. Now remember, since they're both negative, think in reverse. If they were positive, 38% would be bigger. But since it's negative, it's going to be less. All right, let's go down and try some. So here's what I want you to do. We've got 4 problems down here. I want you to start, and I only want you to do A and C. So remember, change them both to percents. If you want to do it another way, that's fine, but I'm going to change them to percents and compare. All right. So when you're done with A and C, pause the video. When you're done, restart it and see if you're right. Go. All right. So let's start with A. Did you notice that one's positive, one's negative? So you don't have to really think about this one because positives are always greater than negatives. Now in C, they're both positive. So there's no negative integers involved, but I am still going to change them to percents just because that's the way I like to do it. So for 9/16, I do 9 divided by 16, and I get my decimal 0.5625. And if I deep it, I get 56%. Okay? For 12/16, I'm going to do 12 divided by 16, and I get 0.75. Deep it, I get 75%. Now remember, they're both positive, so don't be thinking in reverse. 56% is less than 75%. All right, if you had both of those right, good. If you got tricked by any, learn from it before we move on to the next two. Now here's what I want you to do for these. I want you to pause it. I want you to do B and D and restart the video when you're done. Go. All right, so let's see how you did in B. First, in B, they're both negatives. And you can keep them as decimals if you want, but I like them as percents. It's easier for my brain to understand. So first, in negative 4.5, I'm going to deep it. I'm going to add a 0. I get negative 450%. And this one, I'm going to deep it. I get negative 449%. Now remember to think in reverse since they're both negatives. Normally, 450 would be bigger than 449, but since it's negative, it's going to be smaller or less. All right, and in D, I'm going to change them both to percents. So first off, negative 7/10. If you divide, you get negative 0.7. Deep it, you get negative 70%. Negative 4/5, I do 4 divided by 5, I get 0.8. Deep it, I get negative 80%. Since normally if they were positive, 70 would be less than 80. Since they're negative, it's going to be greater. Now let me show you one more thing. You can use cross products if you want. Let me erase that. Remember, cross products is a way if you multiply diagonally. So if you do 7 times 5, you get 35. So remember, treat it like a negative 35. And if you do 10 times 4, you get 40. So treat it like a negative. And negative 35 is less than negative 40. So you can do it that way if you want for two fractions. Anyway, on to the next page. So on the next page, we're going to, example 4 is the same thing. So I'm not going to go over that. But in example 5, I'm going to show you how to do that. Then we're going to have you try some down below. So in example 5, first I'm going to get some workspace ready. Okay, so in example 5, you have to order that set of numbers from least to greatest. So I'm going to change them all to percents. You see that I do that a lot, so let me get started here. First off, the ones that are fractions, I'm going to change to decimals first. So remember, I just divide the fraction part, 22 divided by 25. So I get negative 2.88. And in this one, I get negative 2.1. Now I'm going to change them to percents. So this one, if I deep it, is negative 246%. This one is negative 288%. And this one, remember I have to add a 0 before I deep it, is negative 210%. Now, to put them in least to greatest order, the one that looks biggest is going to be smallest. So this one looks biggest, but you got to think in reverse. So that means negative 2 and 22/25 is going to be smallest. Done with that one. The next one that looks biggest is this one. So negative 2.46 is going to be second. And then that means last is this one. Negative 2 and 1/10 is third. So change them all to percents and then think in reverse. So let's go down. We're going to have you try a couple of these here. All right. So first thing, I want you to try problem F. Now, I'm going to change them to percents. They're both positive. Keep that in mind. But if you want to do it another way, that's fine. Go ahead. Pause the video. Restart it when you're done with F. All right. So let's see how you did. First off, this one I'm going to deep. I'm going to move it twice to the right, and I'm going to get 41%. Now, 3/7, if I did 3 divided by 7, I'm going to write the first couple decimal digits, 0.428, and that goes on. But when I deep it, that 8's going to round that up to a 43%. Now, since they're both positive, I don't have to think in reverse, so that means 3/7 is greater. Now, let's go down and try problem G. Now, problem G says, order the set of numbers from greatest to least. So when you do this one, because you're going to pause the video and do it on your own, remember it is greatest to least. All right, pause the video, get started, go. All right, so let me get started here. First thing I'm going to do is write each of these as a percent. So first one as a decimal is negative 7.65. So that's negative 765%. In the second one, you just have to deep it, is negative 778%. And the third one as a decimal is negative 7.17, which is negative 717%. Now, the one that is greatest is going to be the one that looks smallest. Remember to think in reverse. So the one that looks smallest, if they were positive, would be this one. So that means the first one, the greatest one, is going to be negative 7 17 hundredths. So now I'm done with this one. Now, the next one that looks the smallest would be this one. So negative 7 13 twentieths. And that means the last one, the least one, the one that actually looks the biggest, is negative 7.78. All right, if you had that, give yourself a C. And we're on to the last page here. So we're going to go over this example because this puts it in a real world example. Just stick with me here. This says, Mr. Plum His science class is growing the plants under different conditions. The table shows the difference from the average for some students' plants. Order the differences from least to greatest. So we have to put this table in least to greatest order. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put my lines here. And this one is going to be the least, and this one is going to be the greatest. You don't have to write it like this, but this will save me some room. So in the table, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change them all to decimals and then percents. So first off, this one here, remember it's going to be 3 point, and 1 divided by 4 is 0.25. So this one's going to be 325%, not negative. Now for Debbie, I'm going to deep it, add a 0. Hers is going to be negative 220%. For Suni, I just have to deep it. It's going to be 170%. And for Leonora, if I divide first, I get negative 1.7. Because remember, I just did the 7 divided by 10. And if I deep it, add my 0, I get negative 170%. So the numbers I have circled are my percents. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the positive ones, because I'm going to take care of the positive ones first, because then I don't have to think about them. So my greatest numbers are going to be the positives. So my greatest one will be Ricky's at 3 1/4. And my second one will be Suni's at 1.7. Notice I'm using the original numbers in the table, not the percents that I changed them to. So I'm going to cross out Ricky's and Suni's because they're done. I don't want to think about them. I only want to think about Debbie and Leonora's. So now remember, these two are negative, so you have to think in reverse. So if I'm looking at their 2%, Debbie's looks bigger, 220. If it were positive, would be bigger. So it's got to be smaller because it's negative. So Debbie's is going to be the least. So it's going to be negative 2.2. And that leaves Leonora's at negative 1 7/10. So this is my answer in least to greatest order. All right, I hope this helped. Thanks for watching. If you were absent, I'm sure you've got some of these guided practice problems to do, so make sure you check your absence sheet, and please ask me for help if you need any. Talk to you later.